Zach, can you believe it has been almost a year since we officially launched buffering as the Calyx podcast?
Genuinely can't believe it. We're coming up on 100 total podcast episodes, but Gabe, I have to tell you, last weekend I did go back to our YouTube channel, and I shouldn't say this because now people know how to do it, but you can filter by oldest or like popular. I set that thing to oldest and looked at some of our original episodes. Man, I would not recommend doing that.
I can't believe you did that. I feel like that would make me feel so bad about myself going back and watching some of those old terrible episodes.
I just had to skim a couple episodes, but I think we've come a long way, Gabe. There's an old meme that goes around. It says, first I'm shy, then I'm a podcast. And I feel like that's the vibe we've got going here, but we've done almost 100 episodes. So stay tuned for the high budget 100th episode here coming up. And Gabe, I couldn't have picked a better co-host.
I mean, nobody else wanted to do it with us. So, I think we
also didn't ask, but.
Well, this is true. Yeah.
Remy would probably be. I think Remy would be interested.
Yeah, Remy would definitely be interested for sure. But no, it's cool thinking about how far we've come, Zach. And I genuinely do appreciate that people take time out of their lives to listen to this, especially when, we started this off and we didn't really know what we were doing. And we were just sort of flying by the seat of our pants a little bit, maybe, I don't know, slightly less so now, but it's so fun to come on here each week to have these conversations. When I'm out at events and I see people and talk to them about it, I just genuinely appreciate the feedback that we get. What we're going to do today, Zach, is, kind of highlight some of the conversations that we've had over the last year. But honestly, it was pretty fun sitting and looking back at these conversations and seeing some of the themes that we've touched on over the last year, seeing the kind of how some of those themes have become more popular. We'll talk about some of them today, but customer experience, AI, those sorts of things have started to kind of filter their way to the top of popularity from a podcast perspective. So I'm excited to dig into this and really kind of hit some of these things in a bit more detail as we go through the conversation today.
Absolutely. Gabe, you mentioned, of course, the technology and everything there too, but I think just, reflecting back a little bit, even before last year with the original podcast, just how much has changed, not only in the industry, but with marketing and customer experience and your business operations overall. So, I'm glad we get to have those conversations. And next week following ConneXions, we will, of course, be sitting down with some fantastic guests on site and then following with a ConneXions recap episode similar to last year. So very excited to talk about, what we learned next week and what's coming down the pipeline as well.
Yeah. It's going to be awesome to sit down. We got a bunch scheduled. The scheduling of these, Zach, is always a little bit of a nightmare, but I think we've got most of them locked down. So that should be great. And then, I really enjoyed our ConneXions recap episode last year. I thought that was super fun to kind of hit some of those key themes. So we'll definitely be doing that again this year, getting into the specific details that are talked about at the event, man. It's going to be awesome. And we get to see each other in real life, dude. And we get to do like live podcasts with each other. It's a once a year kind of thing.
I'm very excited. I was telling Gabe before we started this episode that, last year we packed up and, took the podcast on the road for the first time, neither of us having, the technical expertise to do that. And this year,
Zach is being delicate. We did not know what the hell we were doing last year. And we found out 2 weeks before that we were going to be doing it. So we were flying by the seat of our pants, to say the least.
I just remember trying to figure out how are we gonna do the video, or how are we gonna we only have one microphone. That was back in the day, but here we are today, Gabe, ready to hit the road. And you mentioned people asking about the podcast too, but it's funny because I think probably 100% of the customer visits between the two of us here, Gabe, in the past couple of weeks started with, "Hey, I was listening to your podcast," or "Where's Gabe at?" kind of thing. But no, we do not come as a package deal, although we do host the package.
Yes, yeah, I had multiple people at the meeting I was at last week ask where Zach was. So, and we're bummed that you didn't get to come along on that trip. So, we'll remedy that next week.
I can't wait. But Gabe, let's kick things off today talking a little bit about customer experience. We did 2 episodes this year. I think both in Q1. But we did the Beyond Mediocrity with John Pico. and then also the future of customer experience with our own chief customer officer, John DeRocher. So those are kind of where we started the year off with talking all about customer experience and why it's so important in 2025.
Yeah, we've definitely weaved a lot of those conversations through through the future podcast as we went through the year. But I'm really glad we did these at the beginning of the year because I feel like they set the tone for a lot of the conversation we were going to have throughout the year. I also was joking with you before we started the podcast, Zach, that I feel like these are a couple of the more popular episodes we've done. In order to increase our popularity, we need to talk about customer experience and we need to have somebody named John on the podcast. Those are the two things that we need to do going forward. So we got to give the people what they want and get some more Johns and customer experience discussion on the podcast.
Well, I was going to tell you, Gabe, the episode with John was one of my favorite episodes we've done yet. Now, which one that was is I'll leave that up to the listener, but both fantastic episodes. And like you said, Gabe, it really kickstarted some of these conversations we had throughout the year, even though we talk more about technology, marketing, best practices, everything like that. It's all kind of revolves around what are you doing to improve your customer experience? And what is your competition doing to, I would say, improve their customer experience, but that's not what we typically see with some of these big providers.
No, and it's definitely a theme that'll come up as we get into those details a little bit more. But the agility of the smaller company to be able to do these things that a large company cannot, I think, is a huge competitive advantage for the majority of the customers that we work with. There's a lot more agility in their businesses than there is with the very large national providers. You mentioned technology too, Zach, and we have definitely talked technology a lot on this on this podcast. I was actually thinking when you were talking about the old podcast episodes, did we even talk AI on those episodes? I kind of feel like we didn't
I don't
because I
think we
don't think
ever
it really
did.
existed at that point.
No, and I was doing the math today, and there was only about 20 of these episodes, the lost episodes of the Buffering podcast. But no, there was no talk about AI. So, those the audience in
What
their
did we
past
even
life
talk
is
about
missing
if we
out.
weren't talking about AI? My goodness.
Well, the first episode, and this might be just some context for the listener too. The first episode we ever did was just a let's test it out and see what happens. And I think it's still like one of our most popular episodes, which blows my mind. But it was all about Facebook and Meta. And if
Right.
you remember, Gabe, we recorded that. We didn't have microphones, so we recorded that. I did mine on like my
It
3 Apple
sounds so
headphones that
bad.
come with your iPhone. But that's where the podcast started. But it goes back to something we often talk about is not only testing things and trying new things out, but I was a big proponent of like, hey, use the phone, use the camera in your pocket, use your iPhone. You don't need these, $1 million pieces of equipment to build a website or have local photography or, things of that nature too. But that was kind of what we covered in that episode, which is it's funny to look back on now
Mm,
from a podcast perspective.
indeed. Well, we did talk AI a bunch this year on a bunch of episodes, but the three that really kind of jumped out to us, Zach, as we were kind of recapping the year, so to speak, is the prompt playbook, how to fine tune AI skills. Then we quickly contradicted ourselves and went basically beyond the prompt and started talking about living in a post prompt world or a promptless world using AI. So those were kind of fun. I don't know if we did those full on back to back. I think they were over a few week period of time. But those were really interesting conversations to kind of juxtaposition around, starting around prompts and then thinking about where that goes in the future in that quote unquote promptless world.
Yeah, and I don't think we necessarily contradicted ourselves. You have to start somewhere. And
Correct.
over the past 3+ years now, since tools like ChatGPT, Grok, you name your AI tool have launched, it's been everyone going in and prompting this tool, right? Like that's where you've traditionally started. So we talked about the different ways to prompt and moving beyond the Google search. What time is it in, Alaska, right? Compared to, getting more detail, getting more context, or more in-depth questions. And then beyond the prompt, of course, self-explanatory there. What's the future of AI look like? And what we said in that episode was, yeah, your prompts are great today. They're helping you get things done or asking random Siri questions, things like that. But at the end of the day, would it make more sense for AI to be more agentic, hands off, and do the work without you needing to prompt it or without you even knowing per se?
And that sort of led us into one of the more recent episodes that we've done, which is the agentic browser and that integration of Gemini and how it's reshaping the marketer's funnel. So we'll touch on that a little bit as we go into AI as well. I continue to use that more and more, man, since it launched just a couple of weeks ago, but continue to be really impressed with that Gemini integration into Chrome and how it's going to be so different for consumers and marketers as more people adopt it.
The agentic browser episode kills me because we kind of set it up at the end saying like, where do you think we're going to be in 12 months, right? And within a week, several things happened. Number one, Meta came out and they were talking about how they would like to use your data from your AI interactions to better market to people. And then number two was the other AI browser came out, which did have the automation. Because I remember I told you I was like, the first thing I tried with Gemini's browser was I tried to get it to actually buy services because Google knows a lot about me. That's the first thing I tried. It didn't do it. The second thing I tried though was with this other AI browser, and it actually did. Now it didn't really fully understand who I was. So I basically said, like, hey, my name is Sean Doe, like buy service for me. And it
Hmm.
went and clicked and filled out the form and everything. But I thought, man, knowing how much data someone like Google and Gemini would have on you with how tightly integrated it would be with a platform like Gmail or even like e-commerce solutions as well. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And then the third thing that happened was the apps and Chat GPT with OpenAI, where you can now integrate with apps like Spotify. Zillow was on there too, which was funny to me because like you can like describe your house and it will like go out and find it. And I thought, man, how
That's
many
funny.
people are going to go on and be like, I want a beachfront home, 7 bedrooms, a pool, and my budget is, $300,000.
There are 0 listings that match your criteria. Yeah, that's going to be a little rough for somebody, but what are you going to do? That's funny. I didn't
Yeah.
know there
So the
was Zillow
agentic browser, I
integration.
mean, yeah, so much has changed with AI. And I mean, by the time we publish this episode, something new will be out too.
100%.
It's going to be a big theme at ConneXions, Gabe, as you know this year too. So very excited to share a little bit more with our customers and those in the industry on what's happening there. And then I'm hoping next year at ConneXions 2026, we can talk with some customers and see how AI has continued to shape their business as well. And we'll follow up on the agentic browser, see where that's ended up.
For sure. Well, and this is a perfect transition, Zach, because we were talking about how fast this technology is changing and how rapidly everything is happening here. It's kind of mind boggling. The other thing or the other kind of theme that we talked about a lot through the year was psychology and psychology backed studies around marketing and pricing and how people buy. We had a whole episode around why we buy, the science of the consumer brain. We did things around choice architecture and thinking about your buyer flow, lost dollars, the real hidden cost for not having this stuff laid out appropriately. We did a few episodes about that throughout the year. And the reason I think it's interesting juxtaposing these two things is AI is changing at a mind boggling pace. You know what doesn't change at a mind boggling pace? Our brains and how we associate these things what from a psychological perspective. That the way we interact, our actual thought process changes very slowly. And so while again, the technology is changing rapidly, our brain and our psychology and how we buy actually doesn't change that much. So I
It's
feel like a
I,
lot of those things are still very applicable.
and I love consumer behavior to
Hmm.
begin with, whether it's the psychology, the social influences, personal factors that lead you to making your buying decisions. It's so critical for businesses to be effective in these areas, right? If we're going to, sell these new products and services, hopefully a value-based software that's going to better resonate with people. Again, helping people make these decisions is even more important today than ever. And I made a comment too, Gabe. I said something recently, and I'll repeat this at Connections as well. So stay tuned. But as marketers, we've never had as much access to data as we do today. And again, talking about consumer behavior, using that data to optimize your marketing strategy for individuals is, I said it, it's critical.
Yep. It's that really important blend of, like you said, leveraging the technology, leveraging the data that we have access to now, but also incorporating those long-term studies, that long-term knowledge that we have about what makes people buy, what makes people tick. If you're able to unlock those two things and put them together, I hate to use the term like cooking with gas. It makes me feel like a super old man, but yeah, we're cooking with gas if we can figure that part out right.
Yeah, say whatever you want, Game on the podcast. I won't
No
throw you under the
judgment.
bus. But I said something last week on an episode, and it made me crack when I was watching the game tape. But I got it from Seinfeld. But I said something like, "Oh, that'll sell like hotcakes," and I I took that from a Frank Costanza quote from the Seinfeld. I don't know like how that popped into my head, but that was on last week's episode. But I was cracking up listening to that.
Oh, that's
Don't
great.
don't fully know what that means here, but Gabe, customer experience.
Yeah,
That
let's
was
dive
kind of
into this in a bit more detail.
the big one here with our episode with John Pico. There's a famous quote from him, and I know you love it. So can you walk us through this quote a little bit to kick things off?
Love this quote so much. There's a couple of quotes that I love from him that he talked about on the podcast. And if you haven't watched that full podcast, I cannot recommend enough going back and watching the John Pico episode. Picoult, I think is how you spell Pico. I always mess that one up. But yeah,
Well,
great
Gabe, if
episode
we
for
were,
sure.
I will say, if we were real marketers, we'd stop the podcast episode right here and make people go back and listen to that. But
That's true. Yeah, but we're not.
I'll allow it to continue.
Yeah, we'll continue. So the quote is, if you are aspiring to satisfy your customers, you are aspiring to mediocrity. And the first time I read that, it just really hit me over the head. And I love that perspective of satisfaction is not enough. Our customers' expectations are incredibly high. And simply satisfying customers isn't enough to build a lasting relationship that delivers long-term customer lifetime value.
And Gabe, I think it introduces the question too that you should ask yourself is, what is my customer experience? I feel like that's a great place to start asking that question.
Well, and how to think about these little touch points throughout the entire journey. One of the things that John talked about in that episode was memory shaping and how any thriving business really works to create those super positive memories. It's not just providing a service. One of the stories that John told on the podcast was around signaling. And signaling is really where well, I mean, as the word would imply, you're showing people a different level of service so that they're going to get an elevated level of service. And the example that he used was, if you're a broadband service provider who has technicians going into people's homes, putting on those little blue like booties on your shoes when you're walking into somebody's home, that's signaling to them that you genuinely care about their home and the quality of service that you're going to deliver. And it's such a little thing, but it's really signaling to that customer that, hey, look, this is going to be a really great experience. And I genuinely care about you. I don't want to make a mess. I want to make sure that I'm providing a good level of service here. And it's those little things that can shape memories to really create those meaningful customer touch points.
And I have to give you an example here because I've heard the story so many times and it just reinforces this. But our colleague Janine, she was on our podcast episode a while back, and she had an install and she bought this house. It's an older style house, but she was telling me about like the plaster walls and like, you know, the style and everything and how much she cares about this. And then she also talked about how much the install technician cared and how delicate they were with the install. And I've heard this story multiple times. We were on site with a customer. She shared that story again, but it just goes to emphasize how important signaling is. And I think that was a great example. Another thing John talked about was the peaks and the valleys.
Mhm.
And this is one of my favorites here, where you want to make sure you identify and find ways to create those peaks while avoiding any negative touch points, any valleys within that customer experience, within that customer journey.
Yeah, I like this one a lot too, because especially for the customers we work with, the customer journey tends to be quite long. And so the reality is the customer's not going to remember every single touch point that you have with them across that entire journey that could be 3, 4, 5 years. But if you're making an effort to really create those peaks and avoid the valleys, those are the things that people really, again, going back to memory shaping, those are the things that really jump out to people. And it's not to say that you should ignore all of the the quote unquote unimportant touch points. That's not what we're saying at all, because frankly, some of those things could become valleys, but it's a great opportunity to think about what are the really meaningful ones throughout this journey and how do I create more peaks and eliminate valleys.
Yeah, so let's talk about the other John. Um, but another theme we had from that episode was personalization. We've talked about personalization a lot this year as well. Creating those personalized experiences is a fantastic way to stand out in the crowded market. Gabe, one of the things we talked about even between amongst ourselves was the if you're installing a family Wi-Fi solution and you notice they have kids and everything, the how does the internet get to my house coloring book. We talked about all these different things you could do to stand out in a crowded market. Because I'm telling you right now, the big providers, not only do they not know if you're a family for a family solution, but they're not going to have those hyper personalized touch points like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting going back and looking at that episode because that personalization word, that theme just continued to come up over and over again in the John DeRocher, the John DeRocher episode that we had. The other piece that really jumped out to me as I was looking at that episode was John DeRocher's comments around rethinking listening and not just listening to what the customer is saying, but to really look at what they're doing and think about, okay, what are they actually doing and what service can I offer because of that? I thought that was such a great point that he brought up around that whole around.
I agree, Gabe. And I think the last thing you'll talk about on customer experience here was this unfair advantage that these small companies have against these big companies. And can you talk to us, Gabe, about what that advantage is?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier in this episode, but just to, really put a finer point on this, this is the beauty of being a small organization. Small organizations can be quite flexible. Many of us have worked in big organizations. I worked for a company that was owned by General Electric for a little while. The number of approvals that needed to go through to do anything were insane. And when you see these very large organizations, that's the type of thing that's going to happen. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's just a lot of process that somebody needs to go through in order to make changes. So it's much less likely that they're going to make changes to the process, to the journey, those sorts of things. So again, small companies have a really unfair advantage there where you may be able to go and talk to, the general manager, the CEO of the organization directly and have some of these conversations about things that you might want to change from a marketing perspective or a customer experience perspective directly with the leader of that organization. I'm never going to be able to go have a conversation with the CEO of General Electric. That's a little bit above my pay grade. So again, those small companies just really have that advantage to be able to be flexible here and be hyper local and hyper targeted in the conversations they're having.
Gabe, the next subject here, just kind of circling back on the AI topic. This is something I don't know if we ever did a podcast episode on this or like a deep dive, I should say, but we talked a little bit about mode A and mode B prompting. Do you have some examples of what mode A is and then how that compares to mode B?
I'm pretty confident we did a podcast episode about this, Zach, because I feel like I've stolen this
I
whole
was
topic from you
I
around
was gonna
mode
say
A
I'm trying to
versus
remember
mode B.
like because at one point I was like, oh, we got to really dive into this, but I couldn't remember if we ended up doing like this deep dive because we followed it with like the promptless future,
Mhm.
if you recall. But this mode A versus mode B, and I think the comparison I made at the time was like the classic Google search or like
Yes.
the Siri prompt, where it's like, I used the example at the top of the episode here, or the bottom of the episode. I don't know my baseball lingo, but I made the comment about the Google search being like, "What time is it in Alaska?" Like, things like that. It's a very straightforward response you're going to get kind of thing, right? Or like the Google
Exactly.
search, like, "What's the best place to eat in my town?" Whereas mode B, it's going to give you, I think we called it like a strategic partner, like the research partner to give you the added context, the additional context, the more of the why behind the prompt. So, you
Mhm.
know, why is it 3 o'clock in Alaska? And then here's the whole history behind that. But so much you can do there between mode A and mode B. But I know this is a topic you've enjoyed as well.
Oh, I 100% stole this whole topic from you and used it in a presentation that I gave last week. And I'm pretty sure I gave you credit, but if I didn't, I'm giving you credit now.
Thank
Um,
you.
Mode A versus Mode B, I used a very specific example for our industry. Mode A, let's say you're doing a Mode A style prompt, and you're a general manager of a broadband service provider, and you've been asked to provide an update for your board meeting about the regulatory changes that have happened in the industry over the last quarter. Mode A prompt. Please tell me what has happened with, actually don't say please because apparently that's wasteful, but tell me about all of the regulatory changes that have happened in the last quarter for the telecommunications industry. That's a mode A prompt. Very generic. It's the answer that you're going to get is very generic. Mode B would be something like, and I'm just going to make this up and trying to remember exactly what I wrote in my presentation, but I'm a general manager of a broadband service provider in rural Arkansas. And I've been asked by my board of directors to deliver an update on the regulatory changes that have happened over the last quarter. we're participating in BEAD. We know that USF changes are coming. We know that the FCC is making this change and this change. Like you're giving it that additional context so that the answer you get back is going to be dramatically different than the answer that you would have gotten back in your mode A. So the way you said, I think like strategic research partner, and I like that. The other one I've used is sparring partner. If you're boxing and you're sparring with somebody, in theory, you're both getting better. If you're using AI in that way, you're going to get better too, because you're asking better questions. AI is giving you better responses, and you're able to go back and forth with, in this case, the AI.
The way I look at it too, Gabe, is it's great for brainstorming, bouncing the ideas off, finding that information, content creation, then also troubleshooting technical issues as well. And part of this just goes back to what your mode B prompt is, right? You stated the goal, you've defined the operational conditions as well, and perhaps you've specified the interaction style. Yeah, we did this a lot with just kind of like bouncing AI prompts off each other, especially with like deep research. Is like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you are a fill in the blank, do this with me or do this for me, and you kind of describe out your situation. I I think that's the right way to use AI. Get the descriptive, high detail results.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought this up because I forgot to mention this. The other piece of it is, what is the output that you're looking for? And Zach, this is something you're really good at. And when we've gone back and forth, I feel like I'm pretty good at figuring out what the context is of the question and bringing the thought process of like, my experience, my day-to-day conversations with customers and colleagues and things like that to the question asking. And I think this is why we're a good combo. You're so good at thinking about what is the specific output that I want and how do I want it organized? What are the specific questions that I want answered? That is such an important part of this when you're doing that mode B prompting, to make sure that the output that you're getting is really aligned to the task that you've asked it to go do, and that is actually going to be beneficial for you when you are reading the output or reading the research.
And following all of this great prompting advice, prompt this AI. That
Yep,
was another
yeah,
great
no, let's forget
episode.
all of it.
But again, I mentioned this earlier, having the agent or the agentic AI do the analysis for you. Gabe, we are seeing a lot more of this, whether it's the Gemini interaction in Chrome. There's been other tools built into Copilot, ChatGPT. One of the ones I shared earlier this year too was I had the agent mode in ChatGPT navigate a website, collect information, identify and like document that process for me, and then come back with its findings. Now, of course, I prompted the AI mode to go out and do this, but having it go out and do the work was a huge lift. It was so nice having it I feel like the process documentation was my favorite because I didn't have to sit there and like Microsoft Word be like, step one, like open a new tab. Step two, click on this
The
button. It
worst.
did all of that for me. And then me as the marketer, so this is more of a marketing use case, but now I can go back and say, okay, this is what I need to do to improve. This is
Mhm.
what my competition is doing. This is what they've changed in the last week since I ran this prompt. This is the new promotional offering they are launching here in October, getting ready for Halloween. It's going out and finding that information for me and allowing me to act on it or just collect everything so I can spend more time on the strategic nature of what I need to do as a business next.
And the conclusion that I think we landed on when we went through both of these episodes, if I remember correctly, was yes, in a promptless future where agents are doing more of this work, you're not necessarily going to have to, there's going to be more activity that's done by the AI. However, if you don't have the foundational understanding of how to ask the question in the first place, like we're talking about with the mode A versus mode B, then trying to skip ahead on the test and go to
Mhm.
in a promptless or a prompt free world is going to be really, really difficult.
And Gabe, we've seen examples of this. Like one of the ones I'll share was I've seen so many people where it's like hey, I fill out the spreadsheet, right? Go to this website, fill out the spreadsheet. And it's like, well, no, because you're not really directing it on what you want to do or the output or the steps it should take, the direction, right?
It's a
And
great
that's not
example.
necessarily how AI was built. Now, within Copilot or even Office 365, they've added agent mode into things like Excel, and you can prompt it to build a spreadsheet for this specific use case. But you can't just say, "Here's a spreadsheet, go fill it out or upload it," right? And that's where I think as you move into these mode B prompts or into these agent mode prompts where it's doing the work for you, you can really kind of steer that AI model a little bit and get very rich, very detailed results that go beyond a standard answer. Hey, I did this for you, right? Give me the context, give me the value.
Did we share the most arrogant and possibly nerdiest comment I've ever made in my entire life when you told me that Copilot was in Excel? I can't remember if we talked about that on
I
the
don't
pod.
think we did, but I
Okay,
feel
I
like we
feel
had
like we
so
have to
many
share it.
nerdy comments. You're gonna have to remind me which one this was.
So you had shared with me that Copilot was now, or there was an agent, I should say, built
Yes.
directly into Excel.
And
And
Gabe replies, I am the agent in Excel. And it's funny because
uh,
for so long, Gabe, I've been making this joke about like, oh, we've got like Gabe GPT over here
uh
kind of thing. But I will say, and I don't know if you've noticed this as well. Gabe's probably noticed this and just thinking, thank God. Um, I have a lot less questions about my role or my job now or the industry than I did when I started in 2021. Something that I would have gone to Gabe for help, 4 years ago, not to date myself. I can get an answer in seconds from AI.
I do get a lot less Excel questions from you for sure, which means that you've definitely figured out a lot of this stuff
I'm
on your own. But
I've gotten very
I did
dangerous.
laugh with my response. I was pretty proud of myself for that one.
That yeah, the Gabe GPT. But no, Gabe does know his Excel, but I can't remember the exact numbers, but was it like the AI model did like 75% of the queries correctly where the human did 90%, or was it like
It
it was
wasn't even that high. I want to say
or
it
was it
was
the
like
human 75?
I want to say the AI model was like 70% and the human was like 80%. And based on a lot of the spreadsheets I've seen over the years, honestly, 80% felt high based on some of the garbage I've seen out of people. But hey, that's just me. I used to,
Well, yeah, I Gabe, last comment on that as much as I want to and try to actively replace you. It's good you're still around.
yeah, still hanging around. I will say, I'll make a comment really quick and then we'll go through our last set of, our last bucket of questions. So I used to work with somebody I used to work with, her name is Freya. And every once in a while, she will text me just out of the blue. We haven't worked together in a number of years, but I will say, and I am very good at Excel. And the reason I'm very good at Excel is because I used it every day for almost 20 years of my life. And, if you do something every day for a long time, you're going to get pretty darn good at it. So I taught her a lot of what she knows in Excel, and she's super, super capable and probably way surpassed me at this point. But bad spreadsheets drive her completely insane. And she does a lot of modeling because she works for an investment firm. So she just texts me every once in a while that like these kids today just don't know what they're doing with Excel. And it just always makes me laugh because every 6 months I'll just get this random text from her complaining about the kids today and how they don't know how to build Excel models. And it just makes me laugh.
Kids these days. Hey, but in college
Exactly.
they did teach us how to build access databases.
Yeah, that is not something that is going to be useful at all. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've ever done like the query building
I
and
have.
access, and
Yeah,
I
I
I
did
feel
that.
bad for like the one access guy in this call who's like, I love that program, but totally replaced by AI. I can't think of a single use case at this
Totally
point,
replaced by
but
Power BI, like 100%.
totally
Power
replaced
BI
by
is
SAS.
yeah. Well, yes, that too. But yeah, I've built some access databases over the years. Not my fave, but
Back in your prime.
back in my prime, exactly. All right, shifting gears back to real conversation. So pricing and psychology backed discussions. So we did have a lot of discussions throughout the year around financial impacts of pricing. We talked about this a little bit, Zach, when we did the episode, but pricing is the biggest margin and profit driver that you can change in your organization. There's a few levers you can pull. You can change pricing, you can change cost, you can change volume. There's a few things that you can do here in order to drive more profit into your business. Pricing is the number one thing. So getting pricing right becomes really important, and getting your pricing structure right across the different products and solutions that you're selling becomes super important. Some of the things that we talked about, Zach, were, this is one of my favorites, but the impact of choice overload. And one of the studies the famous study that was done a number of years ago, where they lined up people, or they had people in a grocery store and they gave them a choice of 24 jams and they gave them a choice of 6 jams. And when people saw the 24 jams, they didn't know what to do. There were too many choices, and the conversions went way down in comparison to less jams. Yes, there's less option, but you didn't confuse people and they chose to buy more.
It's the bread aisle at the grocery store. I don't know if you've ever
Yeah, totally.
like thought about the bread aisle. But, it's at Walmart. It's an entire aisle where like half of the shelf, well, not even half, like one side of the shelf is just bread. So the choice overload, I think, there's so many examples of this. And Gabe, as we go through this list too, if anyone's engaged with our go-to-market success team, this is a conversation you've probably heard of this year too. But the defaults and the quote smart defaults driving
Hmm.
sales now too. That's been another one. We also see that with smart bundles as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about smart bundles?
Yeah, smart defaults and smart bundles, I think, kind of go hand in hand. And the smart default is basically, like, if you think about a smart default, if there's things that you know about your customer, let's say that you have a general understanding that they're a work from home subscriber, like Zach or I, right? And we know this because of the data that we're looking at. And if I'm trying to sell them a service, well, I'm going to try and sell them that default. I'm going to show them that first. If they choose to go down and maybe see another option of different services that I'm offering, okay, fine. But the thing that I'm going to put in front of them straight away is going to be the smart default based on what I know about them. Smart bundles, same thing. I just may be bundling services together to make it a better experience for that particular type of user. Maybe I'm including a Wi-Fi 7 system in that, so they have really rock solid future-proof Wi-Fi. I'm probably including some sort of network protection to keep their devices safe. I'm probably including some sort of prioritization service so that they can tweak knobs and dials to have the best possible experience. So if they're a weirdo like Zach and I who are recording a podcast from home, they can make sure that there's dedicated bandwidth for that for their in this specific use case. So again, it's those smart defaults, smart bundles, taking what you know about your customer and putting solutions and services in front of them that actually make sense based on that data.
And Gabe, as we kind of wrap up the podcast, the last thing I want to touch on here is the power of recency in decision making, and then how all of this impacts the buy flow. And this is something I feel like we've been geeking out here on the second half of the year, over the summer as well. But just looking at your offerings, your website, how many service tiers do you have? How do you sort these? How do you organize these? Which one do you want people to buy? How do you describe these services? And we even connected that into AI because great for the past 20 years or 25, I don't know, Gabe, give me a number here. However long people have been using the internet, they've been manually reading your web pages, going to your site, reading things. But now we're entering an age where people don't need to read your content. They don't need to look at your website. With AI, it's going to be doing that for them. And then the AI is going to decide what's important and what's not.
Yeah, I wonder if AI is going to have a recency bias. That would be kind of funny. I didn't think
That
about that.
That would be so well, this is this is something else I learned about here over the past week, Gabe, and I should share more on this with you or do a podcast episode on this. But a team of researchers spun up dozens of fake websites in an attempt to see if they could basically trick an AI agent or trick AI into giving them false information with the source being their fake websites. Now they did. They succeeded in doing this. And it's just something else to be cognizant of as marketers is whether or not it's a fake website or your competition or whomever these websites will be. AI is going to go out there on the web, find these sites, and provide that data in an output.
Interesting. That's wild. I would love to know more about this. You need to find
It
this
was
article
it
and
was funny
send it to me.
because like some of the comments are like, "That's interesting because like technically like marketers could have been doing this for years," kind of thing with
Yeah,
influencing things
seriously.
like SEO. But no, it's just another interesting thing. Like I said, with the AI browser, it's a hands off
Hmm.
browser where you're letting the artificial intelligence make decisions on your behalf.
Yeah. So just closing off on the recency thing, basically the recency bias here, the thought process here, the power of recency is if you, and Zach, I think you did a good job of hitting on this in your service descriptions. If your service descriptions are really long and complex and difficult for people to decipher, then if they read 3 service descriptions, they're probably going to choose the third thing because by the time they've gotten to the third thing, they've completely forgotten what the first thing is. And there was I think it was in the choice architecture book that I read where it talked about this, but think about it as if you're going out on a date with your wife or, your girlfriend or whoever, they're telling you, hey, we're going to go to this movie and we're going to go to this restaurant, and you ask them some details about it. And they go through these long explanations of what the movie is or what the restaurant is. And by the time they get to the end of this, if you've gone through like 4 or 5 of them, you're like, crap, I don't even remember what the first one was. So sure, let's just go to the one that you said last because that's the one I remember right now. So those types of things make a huge impact in the buy flow for companies and how information should be presented online. How do you order or sort your service tiers? Do you box in or highlight a specific tier that you want people to purchase more often? Zach, we talked about this, I think, a little bit in the last episode, or the gold, bronze, silver, gold one that we did. In theory, we should see a normal distribution in that scenario of, 50% of people buying the middle tier and 25% buying the other options. We generally don't see that. So there's a great opportunity for broadband providers to increase revenue and increase ARPU there by being much more thoughtful about how they're presenting these services to their customers.
Gabe, we have talked about so much, not only today, but over the past year here as the Buffering Powered by Success podcast. I have enjoyed parts of our time together. No, I'm just messing with you. I've enjoyed our podcast here over the last 12 months, and I'm very excited to see what's next here. Like we said at the beginning, we have a lot planned for ConneXions, and I know following ConneXions, we'll do the recap episode and talk about what's coming here in the future as well. Gabe, I think there's no doubt there's a lot of tech on the horizon that we'll be talking about, both in the broadband space and outside of the broadband space as well. So very excited to continue looking forward to see how we can drive businesses.
You and me both, buddy. It's going to be a blast. I'm already tired thinking about ConneXions, but it's going to be super
I
fun, and
It
we're
was
going to have a
funny,
great
like
time.
I was thinking like, man, what episode am I going to listen to on the flight home? And then I thought, oh, I'm going to be so tired of the flight home. Like I've already like glossed over ConneXions, and now I'm thinking about the great content that's going to come following. But Gabe, thank you so much for the episode here today. I will see you in a few days. And thank you to everyone who's listening and tuning into Buffering. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn. And one last thing, but if you're traveling to ConneXions, be sure to download a couple episodes for the road or for the flight.